So welcome everybody, welcome to it. This is our third town hall meeting, which is kind of hard to believe. This project now is already a year in the making. We had our first town hall meeting in June of last year, and then we had one in November. And so this is our third one. So we've been doing a lot of work since November, and we're going to be sharing that with you tonight. So thank you for coming out. It's a beautiful spring night. We weren't sure how many would come. If I wasn't doing this, I might not be here. It's a nice night. But nevertheless, thank you for taking the time to come out. And as we begin the meeting, I'm going to turn to Father Jeff and ask him to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Tom. Let's begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. A reading from the book of Revelation. The Spirit took control of me, and the angel carried me to the top of a very high mountain. He showed me Jerusalem, the holy city, coming out of heaven from God and shining with the glory of God. An angel who spoke to me had a gold measuring stick to measure the city, its gates and its walls. The city was perfectly square, as high as it was long. The angel measured the city with his measuring stick. It was 1,500 miles long and as wide and as high as it was long. The angel measured the wall, and it was 216 feet high, according to the standard of the unit of measure that he was using. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Lord our God, you did not need a committee to develop the city of God, the New Jerusalem, but you call us who are the citizens of your church here on earth, and to be the citizens of your kingdom, to take part in the decisions that bring about churches which will not last in this world, but will lead us to that lasting city. We now pray the prayer that we have been praying, found at the back of the hymn. O Lord God, you said, "Unless the Lord build the house, in vain the builders labor." We ask you to look with kindness on our parish, and to send your Holy Spirit to guide us and open our hearts to do your will, that we may present to you a house of prayer, worthy of your glory, and a place where we can gather to the praise of your name, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Father Jeff. And thanks to all of you. That prayer was robust. I mean, I don't know how many people are in here, but it sounded like about 1,000 people praying that. So everybody prayed that with enthusiasm, which is very important. So thank you for doing that. And all of, I know that there's been a lot of prayers from a lot of people in the community as this process goes along. So we got a lot to cover tonight, and I know you don't want to spend the whole night here, so we're going to try to get out of here no later than 9, and maybe sometime between 8:30 and 9. So let me see if I can. All right, there we go. So up on the board, you see the agenda tonight. I'm going to take a few minutes to walk you from November through tonight, to let you know what we've been doing. But most of the evening is going to be spent hearing a presentation from Mr. Kevin Stuckwish from Entheos, the architectural firm that we've hired. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him as part of my remarks. And then Kevin will walk us through the project schedule, the master plan process, key design criteria, site building, and programmatic needs. Those are the things that we've been working on very vigorously over the last 6 to 8 weeks. So, without further ado, since the last meeting, which was in November, you might recall we did a feasibility study. And I think many of you participated in that, either maybe through being interviewed personally or filling out a survey. And the results of that feasibility study were published sometime right after the first of the year. And that talked about our ability to raise dollars, projected dollars, that sort of thing. And when that feasibility study came out, we really had to stop and kind of adjust our sights. And that's what we did. And there's been some reports in the bulletin explaining some of those numbers and how we're going to accomplish what our goals are, which is ultimately to have a new worship center to be able to give praise and glory to our Lord Jesus Christ. So, once that feasibility study was absorbed and processed, the Future Home Committee took it upon themselves to take on the task of selecting an architect. And we interviewed several firms, one of which was a firm out of Dayton that actually made some presentations for us, some preliminary presentations as part of our last town hall meetings. But ultimately, the firms came in and interviewed with us, and we ultimately selected the firm of Entheos out of Indianapolis. And Kevin is a principal with Entheos, and I want to tell you why we selected him. We selected him, first of all, because church work is all that they do. They don't build skyscrapers, they don't build houses, they don't build factories. They build churches and related, they might build schools, but related parish things. But church work is all that they do. And they've been doing it for many years. I think the firm was founded back in the late 90s. And Kevin was one of the founders of the firm. But what we liked best about them is this is their mission. It's to lead ecclesiastical communities to create environments that inspire worship, education, and fellowship. That's their mission statement. And that was a mission statement that really resonated with us. And as we talked to them, it became very clear that they understood that we were a parish that had, we had a certain amount of resources, but we don't have unlimited resources. And they made it very clear to us that they would work with us to meet, that they would adapt their processes to meet the resources that we have. One of the members of our committee, as we were evaluating the firms and making a recommendation, Ron Herman, I don't know if is Ron here tonight? Ron's not here, but I think he said it best. When evaluating the different firms, he said that he viewed Entheos as custom builders. They were doing a custom building for us while the others were just selling us a product. And I think that was very well put. And so as you listen to Kevin tonight, I hope you'll see some of that evidence in terms of what we saw when we interviewed the firm and made that selection. So again, we selected Entheos. The other thing that we did is we have met with officials from the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and we've kept them very much abreast of all the things that we're doing. And I think what was most fulfilling to me is that we got a very hearty endorsement from them that we're doing all the right steps. We're going about this the right way. So they very much encouraged us. They liked what we were doing in terms of master planning, in terms of feasibility study, in terms of the communication, trying to keep as many of the parishioners involved in the process. And they really encouraged us, and they promised us that they would work with us. And I know Father Jeff is nodding his head on that. Father, you want to add any comments to that?
Well, I just was more than pleased at their support of what we're doing, because there are parishes where they have said you've got to stop and wait and get more of your act together for this. And they were not only saying we were there, they felt that we had done a very good job in the process of where we came. And so I'm grateful to all those who have helped with that. But you all have helped with that, because what they're aware of is that we're doing this based with parish support and not just something a few people want to do and hope to get a buy-in. That people have said we're ready to go with this, and so I was very happy with that response.
Thank you, Father. So 4 things that we've done since November: feasibility study, select an architect, confer with the Archdiocese, and then once we selected the architect, we began the process of a master plan, putting together a master plan, which is really even preliminary to trying to plan to build a church. And that was another thing that the Archdiocese really supported. They really liked the fact that we were doing that. So once we selected Entheos, we began to work very quickly with them to develop this master plan, and that's really the purpose of the meeting tonight. And so with that introduction and with that bridge from November to April, I'm going to introduce Mr. Kevin Stuckwish from Entheos, and he's going to take us now through most of the rest of the meetings. Kevin?
Thanks, Tom. Can everybody hear me? I kind of hear this. Great. I'm going to try and operate this with a mouse in my hand and this on my shirt, and we'll see how it goes. So if things start going haywire, just yell at me. And if you can't hear me. But thanks for the kind words, Tom. Appreciate that. Oops. Tom shared our mission statement, and there's a few of our projects down at the bottom, but again, we're out of Indianapolis. We're a small firm. There's actually only 7 folks in the firm, 5 of which are registered architects. I'm one of 2 of the principals there, and we've been in business since 1999. And again, focused primarily on churches, parochial schools of all denominations, although we do quite a bit of Catholic work, mostly across the state of Indiana. So this actually is our first project outside of Indiana. Barely got out across the line, but we made it. So, again, you can see anything from new worship spaces to renovation, additions, kind of across the gamut, even to things such as furnishings. I've designed chairs and altars, kind of a little bit of everything. So, a little bit about myself. I've been a registered architect for 25 years, I guess now, 10 of which were spent at a much, much larger firm in Indianapolis, doing the same kinds of things. And then myself and another gentleman from there decided we could kind of do this a little bit better. That firm was going after much, much bigger projects, and church work usually isn't the size they were looking for. They were looking for the $40 million, $60 million projects. So, and we were getting further away from doing this kind of thing. So I think that's one of the key components of how we do things in the office and how we work with you all, the parish. Like I said, I'm an architect. I'm also a liturgical consultant. I've been through the program at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago for liturgical consulting. So that's kind of goes hand in hand with what we do. We try to bring a little bit of that aspect and that connection with the architecture as we do our projects. So, I am the one focusing on leading the project. You will see probably a few other folks here. Toby Winiger couldn't be here tonight, but he's the project architect working with me. He's been at several of the meetings with the committee. But I am involved in all the meetings. I'm originally from southern Indiana, Seymour, Brownstown area, if anyone knows where that's at. About halfway between Indianapolis and Louisville. Grew up there, went to Ball State in Muncie for my architectural degree, and I spent the rest of the time in Indianapolis. So, I'm Lutheran, so if you want to throw me out now, go ahead. But again, my partner's Catholic, so. I also grew up in a rural parish, went to a parochial school down there, so kind of know what this is about a little bit. Grew up there. My other claim to fame is I've ridden a bicycle from Indiana to Alaska. A little while back, about 25 years ago, I guess. So we'll talk about that later, so another story. So we'll start, and I think this will kind of maybe be a little haphazard here in the beginning of this, but talk about overall project schedule. One of the things that we're working with right now is a master plan, and as you'll see here when we talk about things, it'll seem like a really, really big project. And that's certainly not what you're looking at to do in a phase 1. But the importance is how all of that might work when it's all done, be it 20 years, 30 years, wherever it is down the road. So it's important that you think about, as far as you can think right now, about what your future might bring there the school, when the church, when rectory, everything is out there, how that all works on the site. And so that's the purpose of a master plan, so you don't end up putting the gymnasium right next to the church and then suddenly, oh, I forgot to put something else in between there that I hadn't thought about when I could. So, and most master plans, you try to think as far as you can, but they're usually something that gets revisited about every 10 years or shit, because things change, whether it's technology, whether it's the parish makeup, the size, different priorities come up. And so that's something as you progress into the future, you would start revisiting that. And there are little tweaks and adjustments that get made as you continue. It's kind of so I'd say it's kind of a living document when it's done. So what we're in the process of doing is a master plan. We're not, I'll say, designing phase one right now, but we're looking at your entire big picture. And so starting in March here, we started a meeting. Right now we're in this process of confirming your program and needs, and that's really the purpose of tonight's meeting. We're not going to show you drawings or floor plans or anything like that. We're going to talk about your problems, which I've heard a lot of. So, but we think we kind of understand where you're coming from and your future needs, and I'll share what we've learned, and then we want to hear from you. Either, yes, kind of that is what we need. Have you thought about this? Do we really want to do that? That's the kind of discussion we want to talk about. So that's a hard thing to think about when there's a lot of things here that you can react to about how the site works, how the buildings work. Now you're out there, it's all new. Everything's new, brand new, works like a charm, right? So you have a whole new set of problems, right? So, well, that's the purpose of tonight. After this, we'll have a pretty good kind of lay of the land of here's the issues and what we need to design. Then in the next coming couple months, we'll be coming up with options on the site, working through those with the committee, and developing a master plan for the site and bringing that back to you in July is really the time frame. And thinking about then how a phase one might work into that. So how do we create a phase one out of this bigger picture? So, and then after that, below the line, if everything goes well and we raise money, we have money to do phase one, design could last in the fall, documentation in the winter, you could be ready to really start building next spring, probably about a year construction. So spring 2016, right? That's what we're looking for. Again, I touched on this master plan process. You can read here, but again, it's thinking about a 20-year plan. What we've done so far is we've talked with the committee. They've shared their thoughts. We've also met with a number of folks of various, representing various groups, ministry areas, to understand exact needs. We talked about the school and various parts of the school. We talked about hospitality and faith formation and worship and music. And so trying to get a good understanding. So again, tonight we'll call this the presentation of that building program. That's what I'm going to share with you. There'll be a little bit of refinement, go into options, and then come back again with the entire master plan for confirmation by you all. So, and as we think about this, I like to just kind of share my thoughts on parish consensus and what that means. It doesn't mean everybody gets everything they want. It's a point where the majority, or most of you feel that what we're doing is a good thing, it's in the right direction. I may not have gotten this every little piece that I wanted, but overall it's a good thing for the parish to do. So that's really what consensus is, and as my good friend Captain Spock would say, it's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. So that's something just to keep in mind as we talk about things and as we look at, in the future, as we look at planning options and how things might work, that is it really a good thing for the parish. So, a way of testing that with us, and that's part of doing this, is to always have some kind of criteria in front of you. Again, defining the problem, and that's what we're doing tonight. So these are the things we want to try to accomplish, we want to try to design on our future site, as opposed to, well, we need one of these, and we just kind of go out, and then we need one of these, and we go do that, and then we need one of these. So give us, think about these are our needs for the future, so that we're always saying, now, does that solve those problems, those issues, those needs? So that's kind of that test against what we have kind of brought forward. And then participation, both, again, if you have comments, you want to participate, I think there is that option. I think that, most of this is working with the committee, but I also tell them they need to be sharing things with you. We don't want to go back in the little corner and do our thing and come out. So I encourage them to share things. I encourage you all to share comments and thoughts with them as we go along. So, your new site. So I know you've seen the site plan. I'll call it from before, from last fall. Is that when it was? Last summer, fall. That had parking lots, buildings, driveways. Looked like we're ready to build. Well, we've thrown all that out the window. So, and the reason is because really that was looking at, does the square footage fit on the site? It looked like it was done, it looked like it might work, but that's not where we're at. So we're building something from start here, from the information we're obtaining. So, quickly on the site, you've got about 25 acres there. There's really 3 points of access, being primarily the one over here on Carolina Trace coming in. It's not telling you anything you don't know. It's very flat and looks like the cornfield, like it looks like on there. The property down to the south, as of right now, is owned by another church, correct? Yeah. So there is a possibility of having another church next to you all. Other than that, you're surrounded by residential zoning completely around the site. There is a 50-foot setback from the site borders, and the taller the building is, the bigger that setback will get. So nothing that isn't unusual for any other site. So I mentioned the folks that we talked with, and this is the long list of folks that represented each of those different areas that we talked with, and kind of got this first look at a program that we'll go through. So just want to share who we all met with and talked with there. Likewise, the Future Home Committee, I think you're pretty familiar with those folks. Again, they're the ones to keep in mind when we want to talk about things. So on to the fun part, or as fun as it can get tonight. Be a lot of information, and we have a handout that we'll pass out at the end, probably. Yeah, that really has the majority of this information on it. And what I've done is tried to condense what we've heard into pretty brief statements. I'll try to expound on that a little bit as we go through some things, but we'll go kind of through every area and just kind of help you understand what we've heard so far. And again, you may agree or not agree, and that's what we want to talk about, or we may have forgotten something. So just overall, some of the key, I'll say, project goals, not so much related to area that we heard, were, of course, the facility needs to increase capacity. That was kind of your whole purpose of doing this, is to create a bigger facility and one that works better. So a fully accessible building, heard a lot of that. For chairs for elderly, you have a lot of steps here, a lot of different buildings, levels to get through. Again, trying to, and it would have to be essentially fully accessible by code these days. So it's not a big concern. But getting in and out of the building, restrooms, doorways, all of those things. But we want to separate the school and parish activities functions. And I don't mean I want the school over here and the parish over here to be running their own little things. It's more, I think it's more a reaction of what you have here, where your restrooms, if you wanted to go to the restroom right now, you're going into the school. You know, you're using the same restrooms as the kids. A lot of those kinds of things. That there's a lot of sharing of space, and somehow that needs to kind of pull apart a little bit, but that we also want to maintain that parish cohesiveness. So there's, just give us a little more room, maybe put it that way, and we'll all work better together, right? We want to maintain and promote the Catholic identity. We heard that, I think, clearly, that the church that we create needs to look like a church. You know, there's history in this building. We certainly heard about the stained glass windows, that those will want to go, among other things. But we want that identity to the community, and we want to promote that Catholic feel. Separation of pedestrian, vehicular activity, you know, just kind of figuring out how the cars get around, people walking through parking lots and into buildings, just kind of create an easier way of doing that, as opposed to everybody's kind of goes where they want. And we want to definitely consider what a basement might mean, you know, both from a budgetary point of view and from a functional point of view. You know, there's a basement's always one of those issues that there's two sides of. I've heard it's way cheaper, which I know that's way cheaper than regular space. I've also heard it's more expensive when you got to dig out the hole, you know. So it's evaluating that, but then I think there's also the functional side of, in a basement, I don't really have windows. You know, what I use it for if I, you know, if I build something in phase one, which might help us, you know, create a more economically feasible building, we use that. Whatever I put down there, does that stay there permanently, or what does it become in the future? So I think there's a lot of questions there that, as we work through our options, and just thinking about how it's used, maybe in the bigger picture, as well as how it could be beneficial in a phase one. So, but we definitely heard that basement needs to be considered. So put it that way. So as we think about various areas of the building, I'll start with worship and music, that we want to create a worship space that seats 1,200 folks. You seat about 400 here, is that right? So think about 3 times this, and we also want to create it for 1,200 fat Americans, is what I call them, which is bigger than the code. Ultimately, when we talk about that in a program, you have about 4,000 square feet here. A new building to hold that is about 4 times that, about 16,000 square feet. And you'll see at the end when we look at percentages of the building, how the worship and music square footage has gone proportionally high. But that's, I think, a good thing. That we want to increase the sanctuary area. We want to increase the music ministry area. And create a music ministry space that ultimately would work for 40 choir members, that it would be flexible, and we want to consider the possibility of a future pipe organ. Create places for pipe chambers. Again, not something that would come into phase one probably, but that we don't want to discount that forever, so we need to think about those kinds of things. That we want a daily mass chapel that seats 100. And that we want a Blessed Sacrament chapel. I know you have different terms here for that, but Blessed Sacrament chapel that has 24-hour access, like you do now. So, but that chapel being really part of the church, of the worship space. So, along with reconciliation room, reconciliation chapel, a working sacristy behind the sanctuary, a vestry that serves for vesting all of the servers, everyone involved in the service, that is more towards the front gathering space, I'll call it. That we need space for storage, That's something I heard from everyone. So either you have way too much stuff or you do need storage, which I haven't seen a lot of. But so let's just say that goes without saying across the board in every little area that we need storage, and we need it kind of separated, that we have our own storage for our various functions. But with a church, it's primarily environment and art storage. Where do you store your Christmas trees and your wreaths and your all of those big kinds of pieces? So looking at how we do that. Restrooms, again, of course, creating accessible restrooms in various areas of the building. So in a facility of this size, we're really talking about a set of restrooms primarily connected with worship. There's probably one that's connected with your faith formation classrooms, meeting spaces. There's probably 2 or 3 as part of the school. So again, many more facilities than what you have at the current moment. We talked about then a gathering space, and I put that under fellowship and hospitality is where I put those kinds of things. And this is kind of a catch-all, but think about all of those things, those parish gatherings, events, how you come to worship. So the first thing on there that might be a surprise is a gathering space that is much, much larger. You have, I would call it more of a vestibule. It seems smaller, but much, much bigger space that is actually fourth to a third of the size of the worship space. So we're talking about actually a space as big as this church. As a gathering space when you come into the building before and after Mass, gives you space to kind of talk, congregate, all those things you do in a gathering space. So, and creating a place for coats, for donation, storage, when folks bring things, where do we put that until it gets picked up? I think, usher closet. We think about these little spaces. Where's the salt stored? Where's the shovels? Those kinds of things that you need right there at the front entry. So, thinking through that as part of the gathering space and how that might connect with other parts of the building and really become a central hub to the church. That we look at a hospitality room, I'll call it, and it's a space that could be used for a lot of functions. Again, I think a space off the gathering space, but it's a place where bereaving families can go during a funeral or during a showing. It's a place where a bride could get dressed. It's a place that could be used for small meetings. So it's another one of those kind of multi-function things when we come to talk about meeting spaces that this is an extra meeting space that could also be used for that. Might be used for prayer groups, a lot of different functions, but and that would have probably have a little kitchenette area as part of that space as well. So, we talked about a nursery for up to 20 kids, and one that has a kind of a separate sleeping area for babies. So kind of 2 areas with, again, a small toilet room, restroom with kid-sized toilets. Things. We talked about a music, I forgot this on the worship space, we talked about a music rehearsal room. So we want to separate the school music and the parish music. So there's actually a music rehearsal room where they can warm up before Mass and store things, use it during the week. So. The parish hall is, and I'll come back again as we think about gymnasium space, cafeteria space, but we heard a parish hall that would accommodate 250 folks at chairs and tables, and a space that is separate from the cafeteria. So that the school has the primary use of the cafeteria. This is a place where you can have funeral luncheons, other larger meetings, those kinds of things, outside of the school cafeteria, and that it would have a connected, smaller kitchen. I'm not going to say a commercial kitchen like the school, but a more of a warming kitchen basic appliances that could serve the needs of a parish hall for small dinners, functions like that. We talked about restrooms. We need restrooms. So I don't think if there was anything else in hospitality. I think that might about cover hospitality. So on to the school. Thank you. We've talked about a two-section school, which really means 2 classrooms per grade. So from pre-K through 8th grade to 2 classrooms for 24 students in the lower grades, up to 30 students in the upper grades. And what that means is classrooms that might be about the size of your largest classrooms, maybe a little bit bigger, the ones you have at school, those that are familiar with the school. And then one of the things the teachers asked about was what they call intervention rooms or study rooms. So it's really small group study rooms where they can take groups of 4, 5, 6 students and a teacher, and creating a space like that, one for about every 4 classrooms. So there's 5 of those in the program for that kind of purpose, as well as teacher prep workroom areas. So thinking about how the main school office probably has a copier in it, a workroom, but that there may be a secondary kind of copy space workroom for teacher prep out further in the school. Think about, again, from a classroom point of view, the music room, again, separate from the parish music room, an art room, both those spaces being slightly larger, and then creating a media center that might combine the library and the computer lab together as kind of one complex, I'll call it. But thinking that the computer lab gets a little larger, the actual library might double in size for books and other classroom purposes. Creating a centralized school administration area. And really in the school there were 2 offices, and 2 offices, a workroom, and a couple conference rooms for small groups. Now those could be shared with the parish offices that I'll come back to here. So there may be, depending upon proximity, some ways of sharing between the school and the parish. What we heard was there's a definite plus to having all of those offices together, both parish and school. There are other complications with that, but again, that's how we start to lay out when we get to that point. But thinking about how those 2 functions could work a little more closely together as one office area and share some of the kind of extraneous uses there. That we need, again, staff restrooms, both in the office as well as teacher restrooms out in the school that are not used by students. They're adult restrooms. The teacher lunchroom, that pretty common for most folks, that we think about, here. And again, I guess think about those other spaces you have right now, again, some smaller psychologist office, you have a reading room, some of the things that are in the trailer, again, those are functions that would still be maintained about the same size, so smaller kind of classroom, one-on-one kind of study rooms. The other way. When we start thinking about gymnasium, I mentioned the parish hall before, and I bring these up because these are much larger spaces. So what we heard about the gymnasium is we really need to create an athletic geared gymnasium, and this is coming more from athletics than from the school, definitely. But thinking about a gymnasium that is a high school court, that provides bleacher seating along one of the long sides of about 200 to 300 people that would have cross courts, so it could be used for a lot of different functions. And from a school's point of view, separating the stage function, the auditorium function, from the gymnasium. There seems to be a lot of conflict with athletic use and school use for plays for that stage, that maybe the stage is considered part of the cafeteria or the parish hall, or the possibility of at some point in the future, an auxiliary gym, a second gym. So again, that's, I think, one of those things that's way down the road, but we want to think about it now, how it might be planned. Providing dressing rooms, not so much locker rooms, but dressing rooms for teams, and restrooms within the gymnasium facility. Again, mentioning the student cafeteria separate from the parish hall, and adequate kitchen facilities. You kind of have kitchen facilities scattered across the building right now, so getting those consolidated and enlarged a bit, I guess. Again, the stage with the backstage area. In the, thinking of the other things, in the gym, we talked about a concessions area as being part of the gym. And then, again, storage for cleaning supplies, maintenance, office, those kinds of functions. So. PSR, faith formation. So this is what I would say the primary impact of this is adult meeting spaces. The children would use the school classrooms for their meetings, activities. So we're really looking at 2 large meeting rooms for up to 30 people, which is about the size of your existing community room here. And thinking the possibility of those being separated with a movable panel that they could create a bigger space for that purpose as well. Along with those 2, thinking about 6 small conference rooms for up to 20 people, or meeting rooms, I'll say. So there's 8 spaces there, and then we think about the conference rooms within the parish offices. We think about this hospitality room, about 11 or 12 total meeting spaces for the parish. That we create a youth room for up to 40 youth with kind of a separate, they call it a meditation chapel, but it's a prayer space. So it's really kind of a secondary space for their much larger space, and they have that now upstairs in the house over there. Again, the youth room would be much larger, probably compared to what they have, probably 4 to 5 times larger than the room that they use. And we provide a space for children's liturgy of the word and for sacramental prep. These aren't necessarily separate spaces, but we think about where those are held. Is it in the daily mass chapel for children, or is it in the hospitality room? Again, a purpose for those. So, but we need to think about those type functions. Administration, you currently have, parish administration, you currently have 9 offices, thinking about up to 13. So there's about 4 future offices planned. And then along with the school offices and school youth and maintenance offices. So, and thinking about how we create, again, how you enter the building, a nice waiting area, again, for both school and for parish functions as you come in the building. The other part of administration would be to think about how we create a workroom where there could be a table, there could be layout, there could be storage, file and record storage, supply storage, and again, staff restrooms. So all of that kind of encompassed into a single area. So we're not spread out and we're not on multiple floors, that we have easy access. And then site facilities, which is a lot of athletic facilities, but we need to maintain 2 playgrounds, one for the younger kids, one for the older kids. that we think about how we could use the site for athletics, up to maybe 4 soccer fields, a football field, 2 softball, baseball fields, and think about how they could overlap or when they're used. Again, I'm not sure the site is that large to support all of that, but you do have a very, what I hear, a very strong athletic program. So, again, if we think about larger facilities for festival, maintenance, storage, they primarily use the garage building there, but think about a building that might be at least double that size for those 2 purposes, and how the festival works on the grounds. Then we think about outdoor restroom, concession space, and a possibility of I'll call it a picnic area, shelter space for various parish functions outside. And again, overall right now we're thinking of about 480 parking spaces to serve the needs of a church of your size. So if we look at what that means, all of those things we've kind of talked about, your existing buildings here on the left side, you can see you've got a total of about just under 70,000, 69,250 square feet if we add all that space up. And you can tell, I would look at the percentages here, 8% is worship, 46% of this is school, 4% for PSR and admin, about 30% is just ancillary, which is mechanical rooms, circulation, hallways, stairs, walls, and then the rectory. So in thinking about a program that we've kind of outlined here, total is about double that, about 134,000 square feet. Kind of see how that changes, but I think the interesting thing to see here is when you look at the percentage, and again, it's the percentage allotted of the total, worship, like we talked, is now 23% of that total amount. School is in the 40s, actually has gone down as a percentage. PSR, admin are about the same. Ancillary has also gone down. You have, with having this many separate buildings, you've got a lot of unused space, mechanical, and hopefully we can create a much more efficient building to reduce that number. Sites in the rectory as a total goes down, except for Father's swimming pool, which so okay.
Actually, if I could just say, my intent is simply to buy a house around there, but we thought because we're looking at having to buy that, we should count that.
Yeah, that's the goal there. So yeah. But anyway, to get an understanding of that, you're thinking about facilities that are about double the size of what you have right now. So it's a big, big plan. So it's exciting. So with all that, it's time to wake up again. Yeah, we might want to pass those out just as a reminder of what we've talked about. But I think at this point, we want to hear from you all, does this sound like what we're wanting to create? Does this sound like our future?
Before we start that, I would mention there are index cards at the ends of the pews with some pens and pencils. So this says question and discussion. Some of you perhaps would prefer to write down comments, and we welcome those too. So we will gather those. So we'll entertain questions and comments, but we'll also give you the opportunity to write down any questions and comments, and we will address those like we've done in other meetings.
So what thoughts are there floating around out there?
How's that 25 acres look? Think they've got enough land?
The question is about the 25 acres. Is that enough land? It will be tight. Yeah, I mean, I won't say you fill every possible. The athletic fields, if we truly do that many athletic fields, that'll take up a lot of that space. You'll probably fill at least half the site with building, parking, kinds of functions. Yeah. So it's doable, but yeah.
to properly dispose the particles of the host and precious blood and clean the vessels?
Yes. Yeah, they're,
Hallelujah, I'm in for it.
no, yes, there would definitely be a sacrarium in the sacristy behind the sanctuary that would then go out to tied to essentially a dry well outside, so it goes into the ground as opposed to going into the sewer. Yeah. Yeah.
What about baptistry? I didn't see it there. Where
Bap-
is the baptistry contemplated?
I'm not going to say where it is at the moment. Sorry. Yeah.
My question
Question.
was baptistry. We don't have one in this church, and I didn't see it here
Yeah.
anyplace.
Yeah, so the question is the baptistry, would we have one? Where is it? Yes, you definitely would have one, and it would be an immersion baptistry. Where it is, we talked about it being within the church, not in the gathering space. Most likely, I'll say at the entry to the church as opposed to up near the sanctuary as part of the sanctuary, but either place is typically acceptable. Most of the ones we have been doing have been at the entry of the door. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, there definitely would be one.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah.
Are you concerned at all about the width of the driveway or those entrances? Because the one on Carolina Trace is between two houses and it
Yeah.
doesn't look very wide to me.
Am I concerned at all with the width of the, I'll say, access driveways getting into the site? I would say yes. We know, there's enough room for a driveway there. This is probably one of the first churches or sites I've seen that's totally surrounded, really has no frontage to the road. I think, part of the issue will become playing nicely with the neighbors as we start to develop, and think about construction. How are they going to react to having cars, that close to some of those houses? I don't know that there's not a good answer at the moment. I've certainly encouraged the committee to think about, purchasing houses if they're on the market, that kind of thing, to create more frontage and entry getting into the site. Yeah, that's a component that's probably the toughest site component. Yeah.
That is an issue that our committee has been addressing. And as Kevin said, one of the options that we're looking at, it ties to Father Jeff's comment about a rectory. There might be the opportunity to purchase a house that comes on the market and use that as a rectory. Again, these are all speculative things, and we might be able to take some of that space to also get access. So, we'll see what the Holy Spirit is in store for us as we move along.
That's not an issue to that because Hannah Camp already knows this, but I purchased the house right next to that property for that purpose so that nobody would ever purchase that house and in the future jack the price up on us. So the house where John Grader's on the right-hand side, there's a house right on the left-hand side of it. That house has already been purchased for this purpose, for this property, before anybody knew that this was going to be an issue.
Thank you for
Okay,
sharing
yes.
that. We didn't want to disclose that, but since Jolene purchased it, thank you for sharing that.
Uh-huh.
Question is, how will the go up there? I've seen several churches where they've taken the windows out and backlight them and almost hang them as art inside the church. Because my question is, putting in windows like this with arches of that, wouldn't that be very, very expensive?
I don't know about, the question is about the stained glass windows and taking these windows, when they would come and how we would use them. I guess I wouldn't say it's very, very expensive to create arches like that. yeah, it's probably more expensive than a plain old window, put it that way. And we certainly move a lot of stained glass and think about how it's reused in a new worship space. Sometimes it's used just as it is. Sometimes we might reconfigure some parts of it. Again, it all depends on the need and how the new space lays out, what it's really looking like. But I've definitely heard that these are very important to you and that they need to come with you when we move to a new site. So I would also, this is maybe a personal preference, I don't think it's unfounded, but I would really try to use them on the outside as opposed to trying to backlight windows like this. That's just my personal opinion. I think, let the sun shine through them. That's what they're made for. So that would be my first goal, is to use them on the outside of the building, use them as windows. So, but again, we're not anywhere to that point yet, but we know they're important to you. Yeah.
Kevin, when we talk about stained glass windows, are you talking about the ones in the sanctuary as well?
Yes, talking about all the stained glass windows. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You have very nice windows here. They're painted. They're not just colored glass put together in a geometric kind of form. So if they were that, I probably would be, even if you loved them, I would be telling you I could recreate those windows cheaper than moving them. But something like this, you're not going to recreate those. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When will the design phase of the church come in, so that would be subject to examination and comment by parishioners?
When will the design of the church, I'll say, commence and kind of come to the forefront? That would really be, to really get into the church is probably in the fall, if all goes well. We'll do, again, as part of this master plan, we'll primarily be looking at floor plan. And when I say that, I mean general floor plan. It's not going to have every little tiny space and door figured out. It's in general how the building works and how the site flows, those kinds of things. Now, as part of that, we will also do some three-dimensional massing models, which will make it, again, seem very much more real than it probably will be in the end. It'll change, but it starts to give you a good idea of, here's the church and the height of the church. Is there a steeple? Is there not? Some of these kind of pieces that help define what that church is or what the building is or how what you see when you come on the site. So, but primarily to really get into design is probably the fall of this year at the earliest if things keep progressing. Yeah.
Other
What
comments,
else?
questions?
I'm just wondering about the time frame that we would be able to begin celebrating in the new facilities. And in the meantime, if anything at all is going to be done, depending on how long that's going to be with the current situation that's going on here, especially for people who are in wheelchair. Handicap accessibility, I guess, is the main thing. So I guess we're looking to the future here, but what are we going to do to improve anything that needs to improve to help? This might be directed more to Father Jeff than yourself, but it's for the people who are here, or that we're still going to be here for a little while before we move. And it's pretty tough, for people who are in a wheelchair, sometimes to get to certain places here on the grounds, in the buildings here where we're celebrating now.
I think those things are going to depend on how much we can do in phase one. If we can do enough in phase one that we're moving we have a parish center, even as long as it's usable. It might not be absolutely finished, but usable. Would we need to do a lot here for that? Because once we're out there, we're going to do parish things out there. School things will remain here until that time. I think there's school needs as well as adult handicap needs we need to look at. So I think once we know what we can do and how long it's going to take us to do things, then we can look at how do we adapt this building accordingly. One of the things is with older buildings that isn't as much, it doesn't seem as much a problem with newer buildings, is they weren't designed to be replumbed and rewired and all of that, so it creates great cost with that. So that's why if we look and say, we're going to be out there, we're not going to spend a lot of time taking care of things here that aren't pertinent to school. If they're pertinent to school, I think we need to look at them because we'll be. So I think that's what we're going to have to look at with that. Of course, if we win the lottery, we can do everything we want to do, but I'm not sure we will.
Relative to accessibility, for funerals, our doors are too small to get a casket and pallbearers in. Please consider a larger door.
Yes, yes, we will. We'll consider doors getting into the church to accommodate caskets and various other events and activities. So, and even thinking about how, you know, you turn a casket, how you incense a casket up here. That it's almost impossible up here, isn't it, Father? Yeah.
I gained 5 more pounds when we've been gone.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this may be a minor point, but I'm sure there have been some discussions about people being able, like, people donated these windows, and I hope that they will consider something on less a grand scale so that people who don't have the means to put in a window could still put in something. My friend's church put in a walkway, and people bought a brick and could put a name on it as a memorial. And that raised some extra money, plus it allowed everybody to participate.
I think that's a great comment. The comment, if you couldn't hear it, dealt with the reference to the windows when this parish was built, or this church was built. Many families and their names are enshrined on the windows who donated, and that there would be the same opportunity in this construction process for individuals to donate specific items. One suggestion here was walkways with bricks where you can put names and things like that. So I will assure you that, and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but as we've looked at ways to finance the building, or to finance the projects, that is definitely a part of the plan.
Something affordable. You know, a couple $100 people can come up with, maybe 10,000 they can't.
Right.
Yeah, there will be, I think there'll be a lot of opportunity there, considering the size that you're moving to and all the things that you need. You know, that's been my experience in past projects, that there is a range from, you know, very, very less costly things to the, you know, the big things. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Mike?
Tom, could you say a little bit about how the fundraising part that hasn't been talked about from your schedule events that you showed at the beginning, where is the fundraising fitting on your calendar? We haven't heard anything other than the discussion in January about what the survey revealed.
The question was when the fundraising might fit into this timetable that was put up here at the beginning of the presentation. The goal is to have this master plan completed by July, and then to move, and at that point we will once again confer with the Archdiocese. But at that point in time, assuming everything goes according to plan, we would then plan to do some kind of fundraising in late summer and into the fall of the year. That's kind of a general timetable. That's certainly subject to change as things change, but that's the basic time frame we're looking at. So,
That's very good. That's what I understand. The reason for beginning at that point is we'll have something to show people, you know. Right now, we don't have anything to show people. If you go to people and say, will you give for this church? Are thinking, well, what's it going to look like? You know, I don't know how much I would want to give. And the other thing is, I think as people see what things look like, that others become more and more excited. St. Francis de Sales in Lebanon, they didn't do the footwork we did in preparation for this. And when I talked to the pastor out there, the first thing he said is, do a feasibility study, find out what you can afford. They planned, then went in the fundraiser, says you can't raise the amount of money you need. And they did the fundraiser, and they were very short. But then people saw, well, the plans look like this, and they put something I think we'll do is put together, it's like a catalog showing different things that would be in church. And at the end of one evening, they had people fighting over pews and who can give what because they were running out of stuff to give. I certainly hope that happens here. But I think when people see things happening, more and more people get excited and participate, which I think is only natural with that. So that's why we're waiting until that point, because there's really nothing yet to show.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, part of the reason for this is I am naturally slow, but I always believe in building slow and firmly beats building quickly and rashly. And so it can try our patience, but I think in the long run it will pay off.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. Those of us on the committee have an advantage because we get to work the process. We get to see some of the work that's been done in other churches, and so we have the idea of some of the schematics and plans. So we get more excited. One of the reasons to try to have these meetings on a regular basis is to bring you into that process as much as possible, because we want everybody to be as engaged in this as possible and as well informed in this as possible, because the more you know about it, hopefully the more enthused and supportive you all will be as well.
Do we know anything about their plans yet as far as how soon they're going to start or anything like that?
Yeah, the question was the other property that's owned by the other church near you, next to you. What are their plans and when would they build?
Currently, from what we've been able to gather from the folks in the city, there's no plans for that church over there. It's changed, the property changed hands from one church to another, but there's still no plans currently that we've been able to find out.
Can you say a little now about what phasing in the phases is going to actually...
I would tend to say buildings aren't built for 100 years anymore, but something that's in, we're certainly not 20 years, but, 50, 60, in that range is probably my guess, before you get into really doing some maintenance kind of things. But, that's kind of common. They don't build them like they used to. Or the other part of it is you can't afford to build them for a 100-year church. These churches were built, I'm sure this has solid brick walls, has no insulation, but I don't know if does it have a slate roof? Yeah, so, you're using materials that are going to last, slate roof lasts 100, 120 years. That's a given. But you can hardly afford to put one on these days. The cost is just so extreme. So, certainly, we'll build good quality buildings. That's a key, because certainly you don't want to be rebuilding in 20 years, 15, 20 years. So you got to think about those materials. And parishes, most parishes only build about every 50 years. It's kind of every other generation, typically. So.
In a bigger facility, has there been any discussion about maybe using the original Stations of the Cross, the huge cast stone ones that used to be in here?
Absolutely. The question is using the original Stations of the Cross that were in here. I think what we've decided is we would like to bring as much of our history forward as we can. So the stained glass windows, I know we have the original cross from the original church. Which
Right,
are
which
now-
actually we use on Sundays at ordinary time and during Lent and Advent. And then we use the brass one on which for the processional cross. But the original cross we're using as that black cross that we carry in at the beginning. One of the issues with the stations is apparently one of the stations is missing. But someone else said to me, "Oh, I don't think that's missing. I think so-and-so has that." And I said, "Well, find out." And I haven't heard back. Someone has 13 stations. So those are things that we look at. And
I think part of that question is also, or part of the answer there is, what is appropriate in a church that size? You know, if you were to tell me I wanted to take these stations, I would really question you, because they're so small. They're small for this space, let alone a space that's 4 times bigger. So there's when it comes to that point of design, most of the time we do get involved in just the whole liturgical art and furnishings component of that, where there's probably a separate kind of committee that is really considering how we use these things, or whether we do, are they appropriate in the new space, are they beautiful, all of those, you know, what we really want to say about our parish as a new church. So, and history is important to all of that, yeah.
One more question. And I know as we're building in phases in that, will the outside grounds, I didn't hear you talk about landscaping or hardscapes or gardens and trees. Is that all that figured into this budget too? Or is that something outside of this? Or?
It will, hardscapes, gardens, landscaping, all of that will have to be considered. Now, whether that's figured into the budget that a contractor is doing, or whether it's something, you know, you all have folks in the parish that might do that kind of thing, or, you know, planting flowers or bushes or something might be something you take on from one of your committees or groups that do work like that. We have talked about, we actually have talked about a trail, which I didn't bring up before, a running walking trail around the site as a component of the master plan. We might even think about exterior stations of the cross and some other things like that. Where do we put the Easter fire, and how we think about, those grounds that surround it. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about the importance of it looking like a church. I guess my question is, are we looking at what we're called to look for in a church in terms of the post-Vatican II era that creates full, active, conscious participation of everyone in the worship process?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's a given. That's a given that it has to meet what we are called to have churches look like and what they're to be about. There's a document called Built of Living Stones, which I referenced and told people where you could find it online, or they could call me and find out how to get a copy. And actually, because it's from the bishops, it's anyone can copy it. It's not a violation of copyright unless it's for profit. And we could make copies for anyone who wants. I don't want to, it's a pretty thick book. It's what, maybe 80, 90 pages, 8.5 by 11. So I don't want to just make a lot of copies and have them sit around, but if people want that to read, we'll be glad to make you copies and get them for you. Oh, and it's also online.
Don, the Future Home Committee has studied that book under Father's tutelage, so it's a very important part of what we're doing.
Well, this is probably for Father Jeff, or with 1,200 people in Mass, are they part of the plan? Have they done it, or will they do a study on the flow of people for communion with that many people?
All of that would be, a 1,200 person church is not gigantic. I wouldn't say it's a gigantic church. It's a big church.
Big church, yeah.
But there's bigger than that. And all of that is in the design. I mean, the designer, he doesn't plan it and say, okay, now you got to figure out how you're going to do things. He takes all that into consideration.
Yeah, we'll want to have to think about how communion flows, how, other, funerals happen, how baptisms, all of those kind of components. And I think that's, for us, it's probably almost second nature because of what we do and the amount of churches we do, that we probably don't talk about it as much as we should because we just do it. So, but certainly we have to talk through that with the committee and in the design about how those things really occur. Yeah.
What is the church nearby that has about 1,200 seats?
I don't know the ones here, but
St. Susanna's is bigger than 1,200, I think.
St. Max?
St. Maximilian's is bigger than 1,200, I think. St. Maximilian Colby would be a church of, what was it? Do you remember what their seating was?
Maybe 1,500?
1,500, I think. Theirs for 1,500. St. Susanna's, I think, is much bigger than that. St. John Westchester. Now, what I want you to keep in mind if you go look at those, don't say, I don't like what this church looks like and it has 1,500 seats, because there's many different ways to do this. How many does Brownsburg hold?
Brownsburg is 1,500.
Okay.
St. Malachy in Brownsburg, Indiana. Again, I don't know the churches here in Ohio, but the ones in Indy I know. St. Malachy is 1,500. The one that we are actually designing right now for St. Mary in Greensburg, it will be 1,200 seats. Floyd's, St. Mary of the Knobs and Floyd's Knobs is, I think it's right at 1,000 seats, maybe just a little bit under. That's a new church that we were involved with a couple years ago. But there's several, St. Simon, there's several in Indianapolis that are fairly large.
In Indianapolis.
Yeah. Maria Goretti would be the other big one there. Yeah.
Time for a couple more if anybody has any other questions or comments. I do want to remind everybody, if you haven't done so and you're inclined, that please write down comments also.
Yep.
I've heard that at St. Maximilian Colby, they have had numerous problems with their sound system. They thought they were putting in what it needed. So if you're building these other churches that are 1,200, I want to know how their sound system is going to work before we put in what we're going to.
Concerned with the sound system, and we understand that's an important part, and we do involve a sound audiovisual designer, not a. That's what he designs systems. He doesn't sell systems. He doesn't represent anybody. So he's purely outside of that realm and works like we do. He designs the system to work. We seem to have good luck with him. He works very well. I can't, there's a lot of things in a sound system that, just to change in a space, to go from this size space to a much bigger space, sometimes takes some training every year and you get used to it. But you can't, it's hard to say, is it going to be good or not? And the best I can say is go listen to, some of the spaces that he's done, and decide if it works or it doesn't work. But I think they do work. It's certainly we know that's a very important part of worship, and we take a lot of care in how that gets designed. Yeah.
I have a question of maybe the phase one part could be working the land to make it usable, to maybe make the festival expand and drive funds to help, create money to support some of these ideas and things that we want to do in this second and third phases of, the construction of the facility.
I mean, I think all of those are possibilities. I think that those are, to look at how we might raise money and all of that for future phases, even for phase one, But right now, the money for the festival we get is part of the operating budget. So we can't just tell Duke Energy we aren't going to pay them because we're building a new church. One of the things I had done over the past year was to do in the pastor's printer column, or from the pastor's printer column, was a thing that sort of was a digest of from Built of Living Stones. And I know that everyone read that and probably has them by their night table to read. But what we're going to do is I'm going to take those and put them all in the future home part of the website. So hopefully this week I can pull those all together and have them there one after another so that people can look at that and have that as a continual reference point with that. That's where we took that document and looked at that and said, these are what we have to look at and consider, and why is this or that important in that process.
So that'll be a best of Father Jeff.
Well, I don't know best, but Father Jeff.
Father, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Well, I want to say I really appreciate people coming out for these things. I think tonight's meeting is not the most exciting meeting. We aren't looking at plans. We aren't looking at what might be. I mean, we don't have drawings and pictures up here, although I sort of like that one. I just wonder what he's reading in there. But this is important that people come out and participate, and we hear from people. There's things mentioned tonight that tell us that I think almost everything mentioned was in there. And actually what we've looked at is like, how many pages is that document we've been working with? The space document. 8.
So.
It's a very small print, and we'd be here for 3 nights going through it. And so this is an overview of those things, but a lot of things have been considered. But what people say is very important to us, and that's why we always do the question or comment part of this, because your comments are very important and formative for us. And so I really appreciate your time and your energy. Once again, I really appreciate the time and energy of the committee too. They have worked very, very hard, and Pastoral Council too has been involved through this process. And I'm grateful to Kevin as well for his work and his dedication. So I want you to know, as Paul says, every time I think it's in Philippians, every time I think of you, I thank God. I am continually thanking God for this parish, and the parish is the people. As I've said before, if we had a tornado come through here and lost everything, but everyone could come together on Sunday, we're still a rich church. When we lose 1 or 2 people, we become a poorer church. When we gain more and more people, we become a richer church. And I think what we're looking at is not just saying we're going to let growth develop by passivity, by sitting back and saying, well, we'll get some people coming in because they'll marry Catholics and they'll decide to be Catholics, and we'll get other people coming in because they're mad at this parish or that. We're really working through the evangelization committee to make us a church that says to people, you are welcome. We want you here. You are important for our life as well as for yours. What we have to offer you is great, and what you offer us enriches us as well. And that's part of what we're looking at in this process. Building a church has the danger that we get caught in brick and mortar. And I have to say, what I have seen in the past years, we've done this, more and more people come forward and say, can we start this? Can we start that? And there are people like you. In fact, a number of them are you here who have done that and have drawn people in. And that gives me great hope, because otherwise we're just going to have a new church and that's it. We have to become more of a church to move into the brick and mortar church. So I am always grateful to you. I ask you to continue your prayers. I swear it's by prayers and openness to the will of God that we've gotten this far, because there's been times when I thought, well, this is down the can. And then I think, no, if God wants it, God's going to get it. And it comes back. It comes back. So thank you all.
Father, before you do the closing prayer, I also want to recognize John Dries here, who's done the videotaping. And thank you, John. John has done this for other town halls, so this video will be on our website. So if you, any points you missed, you can go back and hear it. Or more importantly, as you're talking to your friends and neighbors, encourage them to go out and look at that. Because again, we're trying to get as much engagement and involvement as we can. So again, thanks for being here tonight. Continue the prayers, and in the spirit of prayer, Father, would you lead us in a closing prayer?
Let's close with the glory be. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. St. John the Baptist, pray for us. Let us go in peace.